got a notification on my phone. I was kind of called out in this Sloppy Mechanics public page asking for my opinion on a question. And it was kind of interesting enough seeing the results of other people answering the same question that I figured that maybe this was video worthy. So here's the post. Oh, that works out real good. Let's see if I can fix this. Basically, how long does it take to tune a car? And this is with Holley EFI. And it isn't super specific, but it says basically nothing with like 20 inputs, outputs. So we're gonna say like a normal street car. It doesn't say power, but we'll just say like 800 horsepower turbo car, since basically 800 horsepower is the new 300 horsepower. And the overwhelming majority of people, both in the poll and in the comments, seem to think that it should take a couple of hours. And more importantly, within their couple of hours, are very specific and say that any competent tuner can do it within a couple of hours, which, so this actually made me think that there's a lot more questions that need to be answered here. And I figure if I make a video here, you guys can answer in the comments. But generally speaking, when I ask you to answer a question, there's crickets, but heaven forbid I say something wrong, and everybody, lets me know that at the speed of light. So let's kind of go over this a little bit. And here's where I was tagged in this post. There we go. So I guess one of the first questions we got to ask is, are we talking about a single fuel, or are we talking about a flex fuel where we're going to have to drain fuel and do it on pump gas and ethanol and blend everything in between? Obviously that's going to add a whole bunch more time to this, and 700-800 horsepower on 93 octane isn't something that you're going to see on a regular basis. And then how many pulls are we going to do on this thing? And are we going to let the car cool down in between pulls, or are we just going to make 30 pulls in a row and try and melt the whole thing down just from that in itself? And I watch a lot of other people tune on my dyno, and it's kind of always interesting to see that, let's say you make a pull, you got a 10% correction. Do you just make your 10% correction and assume it's good and then keep turning the boost up? Or are we going to make a pull, make our changes, and then do a verification pull to make sure that everything is good? Obviously that's going to add a whole bunch more time, and in my opinion that's kind of a mandatory thing to do, but a lot of people don't do that. And then the next thing is, are we using just like a generic timing table, or are we actually tuning the car and the timing? And then if we are tuning it, are we tuning it at each boost level? So if we make a run at 7 pounds, 12 pounds, 18 pounds, are you manipulating the timing at each of those boost levels to figure out what the car wants? Or are you just turning it all the way up to 18 pounds and putting 2 degrees in it and seeing what happens? So obviously there's a gigantic time difference there as well. The one thing that always gets overlooked and requires probably the most time of all, the full throttle stuff is really the easiest part, assuming that the car works and there isn't any problems and things to troubleshoot and fix. But idle and part throttle, to me, are more important than anything else, because that's where you spend 98% of your time when you're driving your car. A race car might be a little bit different, but any type of a street car, I mean, there's nothing worse than driving a car that wants to stall out when you come to a traffic light. You got $50,000 tied up in your car and it shuts off on you. Like, how embarrassing is that? I couldn't deal with that. So I think everyone seems to think that you can tune these cars full-blown start to finish in 2 hours. I don't think it's an unreasonable thing to spend 2 hours just on idle. So it's always interesting to see people's opinions on this stuff. So sort of some other questions would be like, would you rather pay less money and have somebody just bang out a tune for you really, really fast? Or would you rather pay a little bit more and have somebody kind of go through and do a thorough job? This is one of those questions that is going to kind of vary for everybody. I mean, there's some people that just want the cheapest thing that they can get in life, and then there's other people that want the best, and some people maybe have some money to play with and others don't. So there's not a one-size-fits-all kind of answer to that question, but I'd be curious to hear, for those of you watching, what your opinion is on that. One thing that I actually do from time to time, because sometimes it's kind of hard to judge, who wants what and everything else. And you got the guy that thinks it should take 2 hours. If you quote him for 2 days worth of time, he's gonna punch you in the face. And then there's the other guy that, wants to be able to drive his car anywhere and everywhere, any given circumstances, situations, weather, and he's willing to pay more for that. So if you make 2 pulls on the dyno and give him that car back, he's gonna look at you like you have 2 heads. Something that I have played with over the years is almost like a name your own price type of a system. Like, do you want to pay this much and we'll spend this much time on it? Or do you want to spend, this much money and we can spend this much time on it? And that works out really well for the right people, but you got to be careful with that, because if you ask somebody what they want to spend, they might say $12, or people will get really off put by that. And they will think that since you're asking them what they want to spend, that you're going to, take every dollar of their money, which is weird. I guess everyone's on edge nowadays. But not too long ago, I asked some guy that same question, and he told me he wanted to keep the bill under $3,000. I was like, we're not going to go anywhere near that, just for tuning. Fixing things, problem solving, that's a whole different thing. And that's another topic in itself. I see guys all the time that are like, I took my car to get it tuned and they charged me $2,500 to tune it. But really they paid, let's call it $1,000 for the tuning and $1,500 in rebuilding the whole car because it wasn't put together properly. That does not count as a $2,500 tune. That's a $1,000 tune with $1,500 worth of labor. You guys got to be real careful when you kind of talk about those situations. But I guess a lot of people don't like to admit that they didn't put the car together correctly. And without a doubt, the hardest part about tuning is that situation and how do you handle it when things don't work. A lot of places will just send you down the road and say, bring it back when it's fixed. Then they bring it back to the shop, and 5 minutes in, then another problem pops up, and they go through that process 10 different times. They get so frustrated just trying to get the car tuned that they sell the whole damn thing. So I try my hardest to power through and fix things, but man, it can be overwhelming sometimes, especially when you get 5, 6, 10 of those cars in a row. Really, I think the best way to price this stuff out would just be at an hourly rate, but that's a little bit of a double-edged sword too, because again, you get the guy that thinks it's gonna take 2 hours, so he budgets according to that, and then it takes 8, and he doesn't even have the money to pay for it. Or he's basically hates you and wants to light your house on fire when you give him the bill. So that's kind of a situation that you want to try to avoid. Most people prefer to just know what something's going to cost. Like, okay, this is going to be $500 or $1,000 or whatever it is. And then they just know. And I mean, there's always going to be those situations where you have to bill extra because you had to replace this, that, the other, or fix this, that, the other. But the way I do my billing is, like I said, I either will kind of ask people where they want to be in terms of how thorough of a job that they want me to do, or we'll just do like a fixed flat rate price. And this kind of depends on, what the car is. If it's something real basic and simple that you see every day, it's a whole lot easier to just do a fixed flat rate price. You can really shortchange yourself on that as well. Like, what if I put a file, or whoever puts a file into a car that they've spent 3 years perfecting that one particular file, so they are able to tune that car in an hour or two. Should they get paid less money than the guy that is building a map from totally scratch? So it's naturally going to take significantly longer. And I think that's kind of where the flat rate kind of really shines, because you can make it fair for both parties. Being fair is a two-way street. You don't want somebody to spend 12 hours working on your car for a pack of hot dogs for payment, and at the same time, you don't want somebody to make 2 pulls on your car on the dyno and charge you $3,000. So I think it's in everybody's best interest to kind of meet and be fair about it. Then there's the element of tools and equipment. If you take your car to a shop that has a used dyno from 1979 and they're using a clapped out $100 AEM wideband, and collectively they got $6,000 in all of their tools and equipment, should the price of that be the same as a guy using a $3,500 lab grade wideband and a $100,000 dyno? Like, should that play a role in it? I don't know, you tell me. I think so. So where I sort of stand on this is, if we assume that the car works, everything's right, I would say that I'm gonna typically spend between 4 and 8 hours on a normal standard tune. Some cars simply just go better than others. And some cars, even though they can be put together perfectly, have all the nicest parts in the world, they can still just be total nightmares for whatever reason. So you're gonna get some that are gonna be a little bit quicker, you're gonna get some that are gonna take a little bit longer, but that 4 to 8 hour range is what I think is what it takes to do a job that I feel comfortable charging somebody for. And I only schedule 1 car per day, with the exception of those kind of rare situations. But more often than not, things pop up and you need to take care of them. So if you schedule 3 cars on the same day, the first car has a whole bunch of problems, and now you got these other people just waiting and waiting and waiting for their spot in line. So I just would rather do less cars and do a better job on them. And that's kind of what helps me sleep at night. And as a result of that, I'm not the cheapest person out there when it comes to doing this stuff. I'm also not the most expensive, but I would make significantly more money, and I have more than enough people to where I could easily schedule 3, 4 cars per day, jam them out in an hour or two. Again, I'd make far more money doing it that way, but it's just not the way that I like to do it. So judging by all of the comments that saying that a competent tuner should be able to do this in 2 hours, maybe that just means I suck, that I want to spend more time on it. Ironically, I just got an email from a customer not even 20 minutes ago. And this particular car, I'll put a screenshot of the email on the screen here in a second, but long story short, this is like a drag and drive type car. So it gets driven to the racetrack, it gets driven on the street. It's a really nice build, a really clean car. And he was actually real hesitant on, I don't even necessarily want to say bringing the car to me, but taking the car anywhere, because I guess he's had some bad experiences in the past with tuning. And when he dropped the car off, going over all of his kind of hesitancies and concerns and the issues that he had in the past, I kind of took this one as a challenge of like, let me see how good I can make this. And when you get these kind of emails like this is what makes everything all worth it. When you're in this line of work, you deal with a lot of crap in terms of cars that aren't put together right, customers that maybe don't understand what things cost, customers that don't understand that you don't just push 3 buttons and everything's finished. And when you get somebody that appreciates what you did, it's a really rewarding feeling. I know for me personally, I would prefer to take a car that runs good in every situation. You can hop in it, it starts, you can drive it anywhere. I would take that over just a big giant dyno number and a car that runs like crap everywhere else, even if that does mean spending 2, 3, 5, 10 times longer on it than the 2 hours that this stuff is supposed to take. But to each their own. I would love to hear what you guys think about this subject and where you kind of fall into that. Would you rather spend less money, have it done quick, and maybe have it 60 or 70% as good as it could be? Or would you rather spend a little bit more time on it and have a car that's maybe going to run that 80 to 90% of what it's capable of? I truly believe that in order to get to that 90 to 100% mark, you're really gonna have to spend a lot of time on it, almost to the point where it's your own car and you're able to dial everything in exactly how you want it to be. And just taking your car to a tuner, having somebody else do it, there's always gonna be that little bit of a gap there at the end to get it exactly the way that you want, because the way that I drive might be different than the way that you drive or whoever's tuning it. But anyways, if you were interested in learning more about what goes into this stuff, you can check out this video here on the screen now. That's a video showing my training course on how to go over this Holley stuff. And also just to kind of put it into perspective of how complex this stuff can be, I think we're just shy of 90 videos in on this course and we're not even to the halfway point. Yeah, you can do this stuff in a short period of time, but if you want to do a really good job, it's going to take more than a couple of hours in my opinion.